Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the first part thereof for the 17th of October 2025. And we're going to look at the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the day before and some pretty extraordinary numbers here to look at because there's been a precipitous drop of almost 500 personnel lost in the last 24 hours. We're down to 730. That's a number I haven't seen for an awful long time. So something weird is going on there. 5 tanks and 10 troop-carrying AFVs is quite a large number in those categories comparative to what we have seen. 35 artillery systems is pretty decent as well, above the daily average. 73 vehicles and fuel tanks and a single piece of special equipment, a single anti-aircraft warfare system as well. An awful lot of drones. That would be not so much from last night, but from the night before. Very big drop in personnel numbers. And I don't really have much of a good hypothesis as to why that is, given that everything else looks pretty standard. Just might be that there wasn't the evidence to support the death of or the wounding of a large number of Russian personnel, that these things go in fits and starts. I say that, but as many people point out, the numbers are fairly consistent. They're kind of fairly smooth. You don't get very big drops, although you do sometimes get quite big upticks. But we've gone from sort of a couple of days of 1,200 going back up to levels that we saw previously, and then a precipitous drop of almost 500 in a single day. So I say that, I think yesterday was 1,000 odd. But yeah, I don't think we've seen 730 for some time. So, wow. Yeah, so 1,080 the day before, 1,070 the day before, 1,200 the day before that. So I guess 350 was the drop from the day before. But yeah, we'd have to go back a long way to see 700s, I think, on the list. So yeah, a slightly lower day in that category. Okay, moving on. Now, we heard yesterday that Russia fired a couple of ballistic missiles again at a training unit of the Ukrainian army's land forces in the rear, a relatively calm part of Ukraine. So this isn't one, I think, where the training was being done in a place where you might think, oh, goodness me, haven't you learnt already? They keep striking and you are still doing these training exercises or accumulating your troops in this point that's relatively close to the border or relatively close to the front line. This appears to be further back, but ballistic missiles, this is what they can do. And when they've got range enough to do so, this is at least the 6th time it's happened this year, I think. Loss could not be avoided. The wounded are receiving medical care. I've not heard of any other information concerning these strikes, but yeah, it could well be that there was a bad day at the office for the Ukrainians with regard to some really problematic strikes from the Russians. Okay, then a couple of incidences of random loss of people for both sides here. Conscript soldier killed 2 military men and wounded a third when turning the gun on his colleagues. That happened in the Moscow region. Russian media reports it happening at a military unit in Narofminsk. There is no official confirmation yet. And then on the other hand, in Odessa, 2 servicemen have been killed, sadly, at a checkpoint. A truck rammed straight into the mobile checkpoint. Obviously, police are investigating potential sabotage, but police say the 63-year-old driver was sober and claims he didn't see the soldiers in the dark. So it could well have just been a really horrible accident that couldn't come at a worse time, really, when you need as many soldiers as you could possibly get. Now, some more footage of UGVs in action, unmanned ground vehicles. This is a Ukrainian ground drone called the ZMI, the Z-M-I-Y Logistic. ZMI Logistic evacuated a severely wounded soldier from just 20 meters away from Russian positions near Pokrovsk in Donetsk Oblast. The robot survived bullets, shelling, a mine blast and a drone strike. The soldier survived and is now undergoing rehabilitation. You're seeing more and more usage of these UGVs and they appear to be fairly robust, coming under fire from all sorts of different munitions there. And these guys there must be a position 20 meters from the Russian area. There you can see that looks like an artillery piece landing, and that drone's still getting through. So a couple of artillery munitions landing there. So good news there for that soldier who appears to have got out of dodge and is rehabilitating. We hear this morning being variously reported that around 3 in the morning, while performing tasks as part of the air defense forces on duty, a Russian Su-30SM was destroyed by friendly fire after taking off from the airfield in Tikhoretsk. According to AV Vector, the condition of the crew remains unknown at this time, but it appears that the Russians have lost this jet. According to the Speaker of the Naval Forces of Ukraine, Dmitry Platenchuk, during a night attack of Ukrainian drones on Crimea, Russian forces shot down their own aircraft. Preliminarily, it was a Su-30SM, which I think is kind of one that can be used, is predominantly used over the sea, has naval capabilities, I think the SM, if I'm correct in remembering, with a hull number 107. Good news there. In fact, the naval spokesperson Dmitry Platenchuk has confirmed the incident, saying Russia, quote, defended against Ukrainian attacks so well, they managed to shoot down their own plane. So a bit of trolling there from Platenchuk. So that's good news. The Russians have lost another plane. Now, there have been quite a few bits of footage coming out of some big attacks that the Russians have been carrying out, particularly in the Pokrovsk direction, that have been unsuccessful. And I'm trying to work out, whether some footage pertains to the same attacks, whether these are attacks that I previously reported on, whether they're new attacks, I don't know 100%. But while everyone had breakfast today, said Kriegsforscher, and he fights I think he's fighting in this area. He was, as I've said before, up in Kursk. He's now, I think, down in the Pokrovsk area. While everyone had a breakfast today, Russian 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, using 9 BTR-82As, those are sort of APCs, IFV APCs, and 1 T-80BV, launched an attack towards Ukrainian 82nd Airborne Brigade. 8 APCs and 1 tank were destroyed. In other words, virtually all of the vehicles were destroyed. They didn't even reach the front line. That's a 4th assault for this month with IFVs. So he's saying, look, there's 4 big attacks that we've had this month, and none of them have gone particularly well for the Russians. He says, I told you. By the way, the 810th Marine Brigade, Naval Infantry Brigade, will soon join their brothers in arms near Pokrovsk. So that's another group, that's another Marine Brigade that has had a pretty unfortunate past. They were getting mauled in the Krinky area, got sent up to Kursk, did okay initially when they went to Kursk, if I remember, and then got mauled up in Kursk, rather like the 155th. 155th were in Vuhledar. They got absolutely destroyed multiple times in Vuhledar. Can't remember where they went, and then eventually up after that, and then eventually up to Kursk. They'd been reconstituted countless times. They got absolutely mauled up in Kursk, and then they were sent down to Pokrovsk, where they've been similarly having a very difficult time down there. So some of these supposedly crack units are a mere shadow of their former selves after being reconstituted so many times and getting mauled countlessly. Okay, so no report says Russia's 155th Naval Infantry Brigade launched an assault near Shakova, Donetsk Oblast, using 9 BTR-82As and 1 T-80BV, and here it is caught on camera against Ukraine's 82nd. The result, 8 APCs and a tank destroyed before reaching the front line. So saying the same things there as Kriegsforscher. And that footage shows it all. So you can go and watch that at your leisure. All of these videos are linked in the description below. We have Special Kherson Cat saying, and I think this is this is what I'm talking about, like, don't know, which ones are the same, which ones are different. Today, Russians launched another large-scale mechanized assault on the Ocheretyne axis, which is kind of Dobropilia, Pokrovsk, same kind of area. Is it the same attack? Well, Russians conducted a large-scale attack with 22 AFVs, armoured fighting vehicles, on the positions of responsibility of the Azov. Destroyed 9 AFVs, damaged 4 AFVs. So it looks like, and that looks like the same footage. Between 5:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, the enemy pushed forward 22 armoured vehicles. So the claim is here that they push forward with way more rather than 9 BTRs and a tank, and then losing 8 BTRs and a tank. So I don't know if this is the same or not, but the footage certainly looks similar. Anyway, the enemy pushed forward 22 armoured vehicles, including a main column of 11 tanks and IFVs advancing from the Malinivka area. So that could be, that's the bit that we're talking about, the main part of it. The enemy tried to change its approach. On October the 15th, they moved armoured vehicles closer to Shakova and attempted to conceal them in a tree line. The manoeuvre failed. 2 vehicles were detected and destroyed by Ukrainian artillery and FPV drones before reaching cover. Russian forces also deployed observation posts to detect and target Ukrainian drones. Thanks to strong engineering preparation, effective minefields and coordinated action of Ukrainian artillery, National Guard units and the unmanned systems forces, the attack was crushed before reaching Ukrainian positions. So possibly a bit more detail on that same attack. Here we've got another video, and there are quite a few videos going around now where they kind of come in fits and starts, these videos, and sometimes there aren't too many to report on. And then at other weeks, like this week, there are absolutely tons of them. Now, that's partly because the Russians have been attacking quite a bit with these columns, but also just certain units are bringing out their montages, and it's a purple patch for montages. Here, the occupiers, the Russians, suffer from a shortage of not only armoured vehicles, but also light equipment, says Max 25. As soon as the pilots of the 63rd BBS Brigade find something, it's instantly destroyed. So very pro this particular unit. But yeah, loads of equipment being taken out here of all types, all varieties, whether it be motorcycles, unarmored vehicles, armored vehicles, personnel, dugouts, you know, everything getting taken out here. Just, yeah, a good minute and a half of lots of Russian equipment being destroyed there. Okay. Ukrainian forces also destroyed a 2S5 Gyatsin S self-propelled gun on a Kimburn spit that was terrorizing the Mykolaiv region. I wonder, because you know where the Kimburn spit is, opposite the Bug River and Dnipro River estuaries as it sort of comes out. And then you've got the Kimburn spit. There have been a couple of attacks onto the spit, a couple of special forces attempts. Nothing has really stuck there, but they have destroyed routinely equipment on this spit. I've been wondering how much stuff there is on there, because I would have thought that if you had a really good drone unit, really effective drone unit that's positioned just across in Ocheretyne or the Kherson, the free Kherson area, you could just routinely, systematically take out every Russian bit of kit on a Kimburn spit, because it's quite a thin bit of land. And, you know, with half decent reconnaissance, you could I mean, they've been there for months and years now. Like, I'm quite surprised that Ukraine hasn't systematically just wiped out every single bit of equipment there. I know it's probably easier said than done, isn't it? But with that amount of time and the amount of drones that Ukraine has been able to use over time, I'm just quite surprised that there's still anything existing on the Kimburn spit. Now, North Korean drone operators are aiding Russian forces in Sumy region, directing strikes on Ukrainian positions operating from Russia's Kursk region. These units conduct reconnaissance and assist in fire correction against Ukrainian troops. So the Russians haven't yet sent North Koreans into Ukraine. I think that will be a bit of a red line. I've talked about this previously, that the Russians have cleverly kept them up in Kursk and are using them in line with their Article 5 equivalent military security guarantee, whereby Russia can call on North Koreans to protect their territories when they're invaded, and vice versa. So the way that they are playing this is that Ukraine invaded Kursk, and that was part of Russia's sovereign territory. I know there's a bit of a argument as to whether those territories that Russia has constitutionally adopted or stolen, as in they've written into their constitution, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson and Crimea. Well, if they are technically Russia, then Ukraine is invading into those territories. And so they could get away with sending North Koreans down to those territories. But I think that would be deemed as too controversial for international onlookers. So they're keeping the North Koreans up in Kursk, but they're using them evidently to help support activities down into Sumy, using them to operate drones. As you can see from this footage, there's a whole stack of drones there. These are North Koreans assisting the Russian, what is now defense of Sumy, as they are getting pushed further and further north. Now, I showed you a video yesterday of a Yak-52 nudging a Zala reconnaissance drone out of the sky with its wing. People saying Hurricanes used to do this with V1s in the Second World War, sorry. And I showed you that, and I thought that's pretty impressive. That's pretty good way of taking these drones out. And the assumption was, actually, this is a bit of footage that's probably come out in the last week. Yeah, activity taking place in the last week. Actually, this was a guy who sadly died some months back that I reported on. I think there was an article that has been written on him just now in one of the mainstream outlets. I can't remember. It's something like the Washington Post or something. And this video appears to be accompanying that. But that is Colonel Konstantin Noborin in the 11th Army Aviation Brigade, downing that Zala by ramming it with his Yak-52. He was a skilled pilot who defended southern Ukraine from enemy drones and was killed in a Russian attack. So, yeah, that wasn't actually recent, although the footage appears to be new. We haven't seen that footage before. Okay, now onto distant strikes. So Russia sent far fewer drones into Ukraine last night, only 70, but actually the interception rate was pretty poor, around about 50%. Some were still in the air, so at the time, I think this equated to, even though that's exactly 50% air, I think at the time, given that some were still in the air, it's 53%, and I don't know whether any more of those that were in the air were shot down, because the 70 includes all that were in the air. 35 includes those who were shot down, but it might be more than that, given that the other 4 or whatever may have been shot down. So, but the point is that, you know, we often get this where fewer drones, but depends where they're sent, can mean that sometimes more drones get through, and the interception rates are really, really poor. Well, these were sent from Milarovo, Kursk, Primorsko, Akhtarsk, so that's in Crimea. All the usual suspects in terms of where they're sent from. 70 sent, 35 shot down. So that is 35 drones possibly getting through. That's a lot of drones hitting targets. I don't know what was hit last night particularly. We'll look through Tim. Actually, as we go on to Tim White's thread, we'll look through both Russian and Ukrainian strikes, because he has a pretty good synopsis of what has happened. Now, Russia launched the largest number of Iskander-M ballistic missiles at Ukraine yesterday. So this was the really pretty horrific strikes 2 nights ago that I reported yesterday morning. They included an awful lot of missiles, ballistic missiles, not overall. Like, we have had nights where Russia sent 100 and whatever missiles into Ukraine. We don't ever seem to see that anymore, because I think the carriers of those missiles, both ships, submarines, but also planes, what with Operation Spiderweb, I don't think they have the ability to send as many. But yesterday, 26 Iskanders, and they would have been ground launched, is a problem. Their ballistic missiles really struggled to shoot them down, and they sent an absolute ton of them. The previous record for a single strike was 14 missiles. So they've almost doubled the record of ballistic missiles sent into Ukraine. Modernized missiles were used. None of them were shot down, says Max25. Big old challenge that is. Right. UK warns energy strikes risk Ukrainians freezing to death in their own homes. So the UK is recognizing how serious these strikes are on Ukraine's energy grid. Russia has targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure for 4 consecutive winters, with recent strikes involving 35 missiles and 60 drones against gas facilities. I think the recent strikes are the worst of the war so far. Now, is this today's thread. Tim White, I think this might have been last night's thread actually. So this was Tim reporting on strikes as they happened last night. 5 Russian airports were closed and then another 5 were closed down. So 10 Russian airports. So there must have been fairly widespread drone attacks last night into Russia. One airport was Sochi, where kids are making videos as explosions are heard, but only in the sky so far. For the record, at least 5 airports were closed. Yeah, so more reports on the closed airports. Explosion heard in Vladimir, which is about 175 kilometers east of Moscow. That appears to be a substation. We'll report on that in a second. Reading Russian socials, plenty in Sochi, posting in the middle of the night, kept awake by air raid warnings. It's been switched on for the 8th time there. Warnings now been given to Russia's MOD for Sochi and other coastal areas. A missile threat from Neptune anti-ship missiles near for Sochi and Tuapse. Tuapse is where a refinery has been struck previously, and also part of the port infrastructure by naval drones. And there you can see some kind of missile. It might be an air defense missile there. I guess that's an air defense missile descending in a worrying arc if you're underneath in Sochi. So not for the first time air defense missiles end up hitting the ground. Izhevsk and Ufa join the list. So that's another couple of airports. Russian monitors say Neptune missiles are also heading for Sevastopol in Crimea. Air raid sirens going off again in Sochi. Kramatorsk in Ukraine was struck. And that was what he had to say for last night. And then you have today's thread indicating an awful lot of activity. So let's try and find what's gone on there. We'll go back to, so quite a lot to go through. Overnight in Chernihiv, so Ukraine here, more attacks in Semenivka. Russian drone hit a residential area. Lots of damage there. Regional council says in the past day, 24 settlements have been hit, a total of 68 times using drones, artillery and mortars. So right across the border, the Russians are just having a heyday there with striking anything and everything. Sumy region also getting hit, residential areas up there. Biggest attack on Ukraine during the night was in Kryvyi Rih though. There were over 10 hits on infrastructure in Zelensky's home city. Several districts were left without power. No injuries reported, but drone debris can be seen on the streets. So if you're left without power, that means the energy infrastructure there has been hit by Russian drones and or missiles. We have electricity being restored to all of Kyiv at some point this morning. In Russia's Kursk region, 2 areas lost power there during a drone attack. So the Ukrainians getting their own back on those in Kursk. Residents in Rilsk and Belovsky. Other villages were plunged into darkness. Samara region substation fire was not due to the war, according to local officials. They say a short circuit in transformer was identified as a cause at this facility in Tolkai station in Kanal-Cherkasy. I did report this. At the time, there was no air raid warning. Now, that was hit 2 nights ago. I was under the impression, Tolkai. There might be some truth in this not being war related, because someone was saying in my thread yesterday, one of the underreported things, you know, some of the collateral that takes place because of these strikes on energy infrastructure is that there might well be a lot of underfunding and poorly maintained electrical infrastructure right across Russia. And if you take out certain substations, then that puts extra load on others. And with poor maintenance, they can fail. And so that it is pretty plausible that you would get a situation like this, as the Russians may claim, that a short circuit in a transformer taking place because actually the Ukrainians have struck all these other substations. People hiding there out in Sochi as well. We're going to talk about this in a second, an oil depot burning in Crimea. Another double tap attack by Russians in Kherson. In 25 days, it's the anniversary of the liberation of the city, but Moscow's monsters continue to rage at the humiliation by attacking emergency workers. They were tackling a blaze in the suburbs when a truck was damaged, but firefighters luckily were okay. And then we have Russian authorities claim 3 people were killed during intense shelling by Ukraine in occupied Kherson there. So, okay, that's a bit of a synopsis. Now let's look at Let's look at the Ukrainian strikes on Russia. In occupied Donetsk, a warehouse of ammunition was hit. Some pretty significant secondary explosions apparent there in this nighttime footage. It might have been earlier in the footage where it was fairly bright and explosive. Yeah, it was early in the footage. Here you go. There you go. So that was detonating overnight. This is what I was referencing earlier, Gvardeskoye, Crimea. There's an oil depot that is apparently on fire. Quite a bit of footage of that. Joining Feodosia. I don't know if Feodosia has finally been put out. Strikes also reportedly hit a Russian garrison near Hradiska airfield, and a second smoke plume at the garrison's location, including additional damage. So it looks like, I mean, the claim is there's an oil depot there, ATAN fuel depot in occupied Hradiska. Crimea continues to burn, but maybe also barracks, so some military infrastructure too. Sergei Aksyonov, a Russian-appointed head of occupied Crimea, confirmed several electrical substations were damaged in a drone strike. Restoration work is ongoing. He confirmed there are problems with electricity on the peninsula. I imagine that is probably an understatement. Then you had this strike up in Vladimir, 175 kilometers east of Moscow. The Vladimirskaya substation is described as a major power hub on the grid, playing a key role in stabilizing power supplies in several regions. And this kind of goes to the point I was making, that you take a key bit of infrastructure like this out, a kind of hub, then it means the job it was doing was stabilizing power supplies in other regions, means that those power supplies in other regions are no longer stable, and that's when you arguably get these fires and short circuits happening. So that's the Tolkai one, I think, there in the image. So this is Tatargami talking about 2 nights ago. So this is a summary of 2 nights ago, where, yesterday morning I'd be reporting stuff rather like this morning. We don't have a full understanding of what was hit last night, so we'll have similar sort of discussion tomorrow, whereby I'll be talking through what happened not just tomorrow night but last night as well. So this is from 2 nights ago. Summary of today's strikes and potential sabotage inside Russia. Saratov refinery was hit 2 nights ago, hit with a drone strike. Nizhny Novgorod refinery, drone hit there, damage to the L-24-300 hydro treatment unit. Balashkovskaya power substation was damaged, and Tolkai power substation, visible fire and damaged. Tolkai railway traction substation, so this is what keeps the electrification of the railway going in Kinel-Cherkasy there, Samara region, fire visible in the footage there. Video of a nighttime attack on Balashkovskaya substation there, so on and so forth. Nizhny Novgorod refinery in Ktsovo, thick smoke visible there, and the aftermath of the attack on the Saratov refinery, although full extent of the damage is unclear. So this is, actually going back to last night, 750 kilovolts energy hub at the Vladimirskaya substation in the energetic suburb of Vladimir. It's a critical node in Russia's central power grid, essential for electricity transmission and supply stability across the Vladimir region and beyond. So that could be a very key place being hit. So anyway, going back to 2 nights ago, that's imagery from the Tolkai railway traction substation. Then we have Valuki Belgorod region, an electrical substation. This is yesterday's footage. So during the daytime, it appears that more electrical distribution networks were targeted. And then Ktsovo oil refinery struck again 2 nights ago in Nizhny Novgorod. That daily refining capacity there is 340,000 barrels, which is 6% supposedly of Russia's total refining capacity. So that could be another kick in the energy teeth for the Russians there. And Russian oil refinery in Ktsovo was hit. The L-24-300 unit was hit there. It's the 4th largest refinery in a country with a capacity of 17 million tons of oil per year. So 340,000 barrels a day, 17 million tons a year. And then finally, we are, well, not finally, we've got a whole other section to go, but in this particular section, it was interesting to note, and this is CNN reporting that, and we were aware of this, or at least this was the speculation. Before the Alaska meeting of Trump and Putin, Ukraine had gone quiet on hitting energy infrastructure. They were doing quite well, and then it kind of stopped. And then it started again after Alaska. And it appears that the starting up of the strikes on energy infrastructure was an indication, because it was like straight away after Alaska, an indication that actually the Americans, despite what Trump said at the time, the Americans straight away understood that the meeting was not a success in Alaska. So Michael Weiss, the journalist, says Alaska didn't go as well for Putin as it appeared at the time. And in other words, for either leader in terms of trying to get anything tangible achieved. The Trump administration had asked Ukraine to avoid striking Russia's oil, gas and energy infrastructure ahead of the summit, as officials pursued a peace deal with Moscow, but the US gave Ukraine the green light to resume attacks against those targets after both leaders left Alaska without an agreement in hand, one of the sources said. So in other words, pretty much straight away, there was an agreement or an understanding from the American diplomatic side that Alaska was not a success. Okay, right. So in our last section, the other bits and pieces, we often talk about Russia's economic frailties. It's worth noting that Ural's oil is at $47.4 per barrel. So according to Reuters estimates, the price of Ural's crude FOB at the port of Primorsk on Wednesday was around $47.4 a barrel, which is really freaking low. And that might almost be getting on to loss-making areas there. So the reason for this was the falling price of Brent crude, which sits above Urals in terms of pricing, and a rising freight costs. This is below the ceiling of 47.6 set by EU countries. That's really good news. That will be, it's below the price cap, and it's not going to be earning the Russians nearly enough. Despite global oil prices falling 20% since January 2025, so part of this is the glut on the market. And in fact, there's looking like going forward, there's going to be a huge glut going on into 2026, some are predicting. That will be an absolute nightmare for the Russians. More supply, same demand, lower price. That's how the supply-demand equilibrium works. Lower price for oil means Russia can't get the money it needs, and then if it's having to cut back its oil production to kind of do price controls, then that means fewer barrels, less price. It's double whammy. It depends whether they're trying to ramp up production or not. So, but of course, it's a difficult case to be made for ramping up production when there's a glut. So the price of gasoline, though, so this is where it gets interesting. So global oil prices have fallen 20% since January, but the price of gasoline for Russia has increased 73% in that same time period. What's happened? Well, of course, we know that the oil infrastructure has been absolutely hammered. Refining has been massively hit. So here you can see the prices going up there, up and up and up since February this year, consistently going up. And that is hurting the consumer in Russia, but it's just a lack of ability to get hold of refined oil products. Ukraine strikes on St. Petersburg's area, the ports there, have cut Russia's entire low-grade fuel exports by 43% in only a month's time. So this is from, I don't know exactly which news outlet this is. Naphtha exports remain constrained since attacks last month that impacted Ust-Luga, which handles more than 60% of Russia's shipments. Outflows for the observed period this month fell by 43% from September levels to 198,000 barrels a day, the lowest since at least January 2022. So that's Naphtha exports hitting a multi-year low there after attacks on Ust-Luga in the St. Petersburg area. The number of Russian coal companies in the red zone at risk has increased to 53 from 30 in April. So another 23 coal companies are in serious trouble. since April, 53 in total, and that's according to Deputy Energy Minister in Russia, Islamov. So the industry's consolidated losses for the first 7 months of 2025 were twice as high for the whole of last year, amounting to $2.8 billion or thereabouts. According to estimates by the Russian Energy Ministry, by the end of the year, coal companies' losses could exceed $3.8 billion. Their accounts payable will amount to $19 billion. Quote, indeed, the industry is struggling right now, but at the same time, it is working very hard, Islamov said. Yeah, they can work as hard as they like, but if they ain't making any money, if the industry is dying, then it's irrelevant how hard they're working. Now, then we had, as I reported yesterday, and I don't know if it's Michael Vuchar saying I didn't read India. So India responded to these threats from Trump with secondary tariffs, and they responded with a statement I said indicated that they are looking for alternative routes or alternative sources of hydrocarbons. So this is Trump saying, I was not happy that India was buying oil, and he, Modi, assured me today that they, India, will not be buying oil from Russia. So that's a big... So this is Trump himself publicly saying that Modi had told him they won't be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. Now we need to get China to do the same thing, Trump said. So it does appear that India is cutting back on buying Russian oil. India assures the White House it will stop buying Russian oil, Trump says, according to the Kyiv Independent. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has assured the US President that India will no longer buy Russian oil. Then we hear that Indian refiners bought 4 million barrels of Guyanese crude oil from ExxonMobil as India diversifies oil supplies amid US pressure to stop buying Russian oil, Reuters reports. And again, I think there's some cynicism here from the Americans. I mean, it's not a bad thing, don't buy Russian oil. Doesn't matter where you get it from. But the way that US is like, don't buy Russian oil. Oh, by the way, you can buy our oil. Don't buy Russian gas. By the way, you can buy our LNG. We're not going to give weapons to Ukraine, but by the way, you can all buy weapons off us. So America is, I don't know that grifting is the right word, but it seems that they are definitely capitalizing, if we're talking about capitalism here, they are capitalizing on this war now. They've moved from geopolitical strategic support of Ukraine to economic boom times in other people supporting Ukraine, and that money going to the United States. And you could argue, clever Trump, he's done that, but it's just like he's swapped morality for making money. So yeah, okay, well done. US is making money at this. Okay, leaves a pretty sour taste in my mouth, because everyone else is paying to support. Now, further bad news for Russia. The US is about to flood the world with liquefied natural gas. This is looking at projected outputs of gas, LNG, going forward. So there are lots of projects that are going to come into fruition. So we have existing export capacity, the United States and Mexico, projects under construction, Canada, Mexico, and the United States in blue. All of these ones in blue, Port Arthur, Rio Grande, CP2 Phase 1, Woodside, Louisiana, LNG, Golden Pass, Corpus Christi Stage 3, Plaquemines. These are all American projects that are going to kick out a whole bunch of LNG. So can other nations replace Russian gas with alternative sources? Yes, they can. The Americans are just about to flood the market. That's bad news for Russia as well. The US will soon provide photos provided by the Ukrainian government showing that Chinese parts were used in Russian drones, according to Scott Percent. It is China's purchase of Russian oil that fuels the Russian military machine. China buys 60% of Russian energy resources. So the US is starting to put pressure on China and India and other nations that are buying. I wish they could put equal pressure on Hungary, by the way, and Slovakia. They seem to be less rhetorically robust when Orban's concerned, but there you go. So yeah, interesting. I think, there are going to be tough times ahead for all of this. While, the US might be making money at this, but more importantly, Russia are losing money out of this, or will lose money out of this if these trajectories continue. Zelensky is due to meet Trump in a meeting 8 o'clock Kiev time, 6 o'clock UK time. I think is it 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So talks will be informal, held over lunch and closed to the press. So this is going to be a closed meeting, which is good. According to the schedule, the meeting will last no more than an hour. I wonder if it will end up having a situation where Zelensky goes all the way to the US to meet with the president, and Trump phones up Putin the night before, ruins the meeting with Zelensky, and actually spends more time speaking to Putin than he does speaking to Zelensky, who's actually gone and met him face to face. Trump is expected to depart for Florida afterwards, play a bit of golf at Mar-a-Lago. Now, then we have JD Vance coming. Oh, my goodness. I can't wait. I've seen some synopses. PodSave America did a synopsis of the latest South Park episode, and it looks insanely good, insanely offensive. JD Vance getting it. Donald Trump really, really getting it. Peter Thiel getting it. I honestly can't wait to watch it. Anyway, every time I see JD Vance now, I have the voice from South Park in my head. This is JD Vance. Interesting positioning here.
Я думаю, що те, що дійсно працює в обох.
Oh, damn it. That's the one that's in Ukrainian. So this isn't as long as the previous one, but it's got the main part that I wanted to talk about. Also worth noting, I've just found out that the crew did eject. Russians have admitted it, so they have definitely lost a Su-30SM. Good news. Okay, this is JD Vance on Ukraine.
I think there's a fundamental misalignment of expectations. I'd say this in the Russia-Ukraine war, where the Russians tend to think that they're doing better on the battlefield than they actually are. And I think that's made it harder to strike a deal in these last couple of months, even though, again, we've made progress. I do think we're going to get to a deal, but we just got a little bit further to go. I think there's a fundamental...
I think that's quite interesting that. So that is an admission. There's a change of position here, which, well, it's an admission that the Russians... It seems to me that Vance is saying the Russians are fooling themselves and they over-egg how well they're doing, but it could be either they over-egg how well they're doing in order to try and get a better negotiating position, or they just don't understand the reality on the battlefield and they're bringing that into negotiations. It's like, no, like you aren't in a position to be able to dictate this because actually you're in this position there. I just find that an interesting little snippet there from JD Vance. French police have arrested 4 men for foiling an assassination attempt on Russian dissident Vladimir Ocheretyne. The founder of the human rights site Gulagu now lives in Biarritz in France, where French intelligence officers detained 3 Dagestanis and 1 French national, all aged between 26 and 38. So that has been foiled. Good news there. And finally, kind of good news story, although I hope the grandmother is not found out and is okay. 9-year-old Solomia finally hugged her mum, Marichka, for the first time in 3 years. She had last seen Marichka in January 2022. Solomia spent over 3 years living under Russian occupation in southern Ukraine with her grandma, whom she calls Bunia. Okay, so this girl had lived in hiding, essentially, with her grandma. Solomia's grandma hid her from Russian soldiers to prevent her deportation. She even obtained a Russian passport and spoke Russian, but at home, Bunia secretly taught her granddaughter Ukrainian. In June of 2025, Save Ukraine helped evacuate them to Ukrainian-controlled territory. At first, Solomia did not recognize her mum, but then she hugged her tightly. The girl I remember before the war and the one I see now, well, they feel like 2 different people. Before the war, she was happy, a happy, curious, active child. Now she's more guarded. Solomia can't explain her wishes and desires. I'm learning from my mum how to understand my daughter, Marichka shared. Wow. I mean, sad, but good news, really. Now Solomia goes to school and is gradually learning to feel safe. In August, her grandma returned to the occupied territory, to her home, which she could not leave permanently. Oh, so the grandmother came out with her and has returned to occupied Ukraine under Russian control. Wow. Anyway, I'll leave you with that story. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. I'm going to be doing a live chat with Will Teal on refineries at 1 o'clock. So look out for that one. I'll try and get out a fair bit of content today. Tomorrow, I'm going to a reunion tonight, and I'll be out of it for most of the weekend. I'll take my laptop with me, but I'll probably only be able to get out my hits and losses tomorrow morning, and then on Sunday morning as well, before returning here. Anyway, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.